And it's interesting because this presentation that was done last month when we were in here kind of tied in. I think I talked about this for those of you on the presentation with some things that I'd been listening to with a guy called Austin McPhee, who is an assistant manager for Northern Ireland and has worked with Hearts as a head coach there, and has a small club in a small city in Scotland, and does a lot of this kind of surveillance work. And I thought it was really interesting that it tied in. I'd been listening to him talk about it. Interestingly, Paul, he actually emailed me back this morning, said that they had closed the office for a couple of weeks, so I hadn't responded to any emails, but he would love to speak. So you and I can get together on how he might be able to speak with this group in the future, because that would be really cool, I think, and ties into what he's doing. So some of the stuff here that I took a couple of video clips the other day while I was out just working with my own son and a couple of his buddies. My wife's filming, so it's a little bit far away because she couldn't be bothered to get up out of her chair to film. And I don't know how good the quality will come across, but we can pause it and I can just show you. I just have 4 little clips that you guys can see. And I think there's a ton of other different ways in which you can do this, and there's different perception sessions that you can do so that you're teaching players to have surveillance. But hopefully you guys can see the screen here well enough. You can see at least there's just 3 players here. And each of the players, if you can see at each end, have one has a red penny, or they each have a red and a green penny in their hand. And very, very, very simple. All they're doing is the ball's being played into the player in the middle, and he's checking his shoulder as the ball's coming in to determine whether it's a red or a green penny. If it's green, he can go ahead and play. If it's red, he has to take a touch and play back where it came from. So there's this constant idea of having to check their shoulder, make a decision as to whether that ball can be played or not. So I'll play it. You can see it. I don't know how well. I know this doesn't always come across really well, but we'll see. At least we can pause it and talk about it. Whoop, sorry. Let me go back. Didn't want to play. So this was filmed early, and then as we moved on, what you kind of, if you're noticing, the player in the middle is checking his shoulder prior to the ball being served, and then he's focusing on the ball coming into him. And so what we started to do after this, and my wife didn't film any of it, she didn't tell the difference, but was having the players keep the pennies down until the ball had been played, and then raising their pennies. So the player had to check his shoulder after the ball had been played in. But we didn't catch any of that on the film. So just another way of changing it. Same thing again. You can just see it. We're also talking to them about if they can. This particular young man, I was talking to him about his distance from receiving the ball. He was checking really, really close, taking away that space, and could he drop off? We constantly talked to them about creating an angle so that they could see both targets as they check their shoulders and opening their bodies, so not getting flat, so they could see players on an angle when they receive the ball. This particular player is a striker, so he was struggling with the idea of transferring it back and forth, used to playing with his back to goal, so we worked on that a lot with that particular player. And then the next 2 are a similar type of deal, but now the pennies are gone, and incorporated the goals. And so basically what they were doing here is the player can go and hide behind the goal. So if the player checks his shoulder and the receiving player is standing behind the goal, as in there's a defender between him and the ball, then the ball can't be played there and he has to go ahead and play back. And then this player could be on either side of the goal. So now they weren't just looking at one focal point. They were looking at a player who was dropping deep. They were looking at a player who was making a run higher, and they could play him into that space. So just a difference in making them actually look at what they were looking at as they checked over their shoulder, instead of just focusing on one set location every time. They actually had to locate the player. The player could also come in front of the goal as well and receive in front of the goal. So just different variances so that they could then see had to make a decision based on the player instead of just the color. So we'll see. Big thing with these players was talking to them about the speed at which they were transferring the ball. It was a little slow when it was coming into their feet, wanting to get it out of their feet a little quicker, make a quicker decision. And then had one more. And one of the things we then changed after this, because what they started to do as players, just being intelligent players, they started communicating with each other. So the guy who's playing the ball started to tell the player, hey, he's open, you can play him, or he's behind the defender, you got to play me back. And so it's great that they were doing that, and that voice and that communication was coming out. But what we started saying now was that the player who was receiving the ball could start to talk to them and basically lie to them. So, hey, I'm open, but they really weren't. And my point to them was, how many times do you play with guys that tell you they're open, and you play them the ball and there's a defender in between you, and you're the one who looks bad in that situation. So talking to them about that. So now they had to actually trust their eyes instead of just listening to the guy who was communicating with them from behind saying, hey, I'm open, or no, you got to play back. That just helped them actually check their shoulder regardless of what the communication piece was. This is the last one here. And I think you can kind of see them with this one. Sorry, we had to entertain the 6-year-olds too while the older brothers were over there playing. So they're over here playing a small-sided game.
You can, the video is a bit choppy, but you can definitely see it. You can see, the kids that are checking their shoulder well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Paul. I mean, again, it's hard to see, but I think the checking of the shoulder situation, comes naturally to them when they are not expecting the ball coming in. So they're scanning, they're surveying, they're looking around, but the idea of taking their eyes off of the ball as it's coming into their feet was something that became a challenge for them, obviously. And so it's just a way of trying to manufacture that to make them check their shoulder as the ball's coming in one way or the other. So making that player not pop out from behind the goal was an adjustment that we made there, where they actually had to check their shoulder as the ball was coming in. They couldn't rely on what they'd seen prior. The initial picture they were painting wasn't always the right picture when they received the ball. So that was the most important part. But yeah, and I think you can do this, and we did other things. We just didn't film where you incorporated 4 players. Another player showed up later on, and we used it in like a Dutch square where they were having to check their shoulder to see whether that player was popping out or whether they were coming in, and whether they could play the ball into them. So there's lots of different ways in which you can do it, but I think it's been interesting to see, and something we'll definitely keep going with the groups and doing little things with boys like that. So, yep, that was that. Any questions?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself, you guys, if you have any questions or comments or anything to add. Thanks, Gareth. That was
yes,
great.
Hey, Mr. Paul, this is Dylan here.
Hi, Dylan.
How are you doing?
Good.
How everybody doing? Well, I just want to say that looking over the shoulder is very important for the game, because a lot of players really don't know where they're going to go when they receive the ball. So that is a good identity to have a better adjustment of making what we call a quick decision making, by just taking a glimpse, or listening to the fact that your teammate is giving you an order of direction, trusting your teammate on his voice, turn or pass or man on, pressure, so that's a big aspect in the game. If the youth could really pattern that, they're going to be good soccer players. Thank you for listening, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, Dylan, you have somebody from Trinidad on here. Paul Dekla is here.
Yeah, that's what's up. Big up, Trini in the place, and everybody else.
That's right. Awesome. Alan, do you want to jump on?
Yep. If you can just allow me to share my screen, Paul, and then I'll go ahead and show you guys the exercise, and then I'll show you guys some videos of the boys. If you guys can see my screen. So one of the first activities we did with the boys was a 5v2 rondo. There's a middle player. This middle player right here is not allowed to leave that grid. The only players that are allowed to leave and transfer from grid to grid are the winger and the opposite winger. Defenders are restricted in the grid, so it's essentially a 4v1 in each grid. The only time the defenders are allowed to jump into the next grid is whenever the ball is being played into this middle player. I think that really works on this player, making sure he's consistently checking his shoulder. And I'll show you guys a video right now. And the scoring criteria is get the ball from one target player to the opposite target player. You guys would receive a point. If the defending team won the ball and scored in the mini goals behind the target players, they got 2 points. And I'll show you guys a quick video on that one right now. And you guys will see a player that I spoke about with Hero last time. This player is always watching the ball. Luckily, he didn't give the ball away, but he's always just watching the ball, and then you guys will see it right now. Give me 1 second. So here we go. Can you guys see?
No.
Can you guys see that, Paul?
No.
No. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Let's see if I. Okay. Okay, you guys can see my screen again, but you guys can't see the video though, right?
No, we cannot see it.
No. That's weird. I'm trying to figure out how to do this then. Sharing is pause, bring your shared window to the front.
So when you press the video, does it show on your screen?
It does show on my screen, yeah, but it says sharing is pause, bring your shared window to the front. So I would assume, okay, let me try this. Let me get, maybe you have to open the video. Okay. Can you guys see that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's
So
close.
this is a 5v2 rondo that we're talking about. This player right here is always watching the ball. Middle player here, Lucas, consistently checking his shoulder. And this player because he never checks his shoulder, he's always just playing the ball into Lucas instead of looking for the deepest player. So that's how they get a point. Danny should always be trying to look and connect from one target to the other player. And you guys will see Lucas in, I think on the next action, he'll give the ball away because he doesn't check his shoulder. Lucas checking. Danny, again, just watching the ball. And if you guys, it's a little bit choppy towards the end, but if you guys see there, Lucas, he saw Pierce, but as the ball was traveling, he stopped checking. Then Pierce went and stole the ball at the very end. He checked, he saw him, poof, gives the ball away right there. And a thing that we're looking for to encourage the boys a lot in this one is making sure this middle player isn't turning blind. He's allowed to turn, but he has to making sure that he's free. That the middle player that the player behind him, defender, isn't jumping to go and win that ball. And then if you guys can see, I think it's very important having this player, this target player, and the opposite target player, which is Evan. You guys can see Evan, that player right there, has to have a relationship with these two wingers. If Danny would have seen him, Danny would have been able to connect directly with this player. They don't have to connect with this one. They can go from Alberto, which is the target player, to Danny, to Evan. But Danny never saw him. So that's why he was never able to really find him. And that's something that we're working on a lot with Danny. But Lucas, Fernando, those guys are a little bit better at it. But that's something that we have to work on with this player. So that's just a smaller game of Rondo. and then I'll show you guys the next activity we played, which is a bigger game now. It's so the rules are: there's free movement inside the grid. There's a target player. There's 3v3+3. There's a target player. They're only allowed to move in between the goals. This middle player he can move anywhere inside the grid. So the scoring criteria is 5 passes equals 1 point. Normal goals, which is a player dribbling through and scoring, that's 1 point. If we can score off linking off of this middle player and scoring directly, it's 2 points. The one that I really wanted to see was target to target, laying off to either one of the players and then scoring. Then that goal counts as 3. And then I'll show you guys that video as well. Okay. All right, here we go. And you guys will see this middle player consistently taking surveillance. That's one of our, he's a center back. It's a little bit choppy, I know. Let me see if I can pause it there. Is that choppy or is it pretty smooth for you guys?
Yeah, it's not even
Choppy.
playing the video on my side.
No? Okay, let me.
It's just a picture, Alan. It's nothing going on.
No? Okay, let me see if I can try that one.
Maybe the internet is too crowded. I don't know. Slow, maybe. Okay, now.
Okay. Can you guys see that now?
Yep.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This middle play consistently taking surveillance, looking for his positioning, looking to play in between all those 3 players. So this is a really good action right here. He plays in, he plays a bounce pass, it goes out, through, and then the third man with Elijah, that plays at 2010.
So when you approached the training session, Alan, and you set up the game, how did you kind of speak to the players? Did you talk about the theme of perception, surveillance? How did you kind of set it up for them?
So we started off in that 5v2 rondo. Started from that 5v2 rondo, and I consistently asked them to not always look to play the ball into the middle player, to look for the deepest player. But in order to see that deepest player, they had to make sure they were consistently taking surveillance, and that player had to, the end player, the target player in that 5v2 rondo, had to consistently be working across the line. So it's always, we're taking surveillance, but we're orienting our body so we can see every player on the field. And whenever we went into this game, it was just, we went from that 5v2 rondo into this game, just linking up that game with this one, just bigger numbers now. And it was consistent, trying to make sure that we're not just looking to play, because we played this game before, but with different rules. And what ends up happening, they just pass the ball there and they never look for the target player. So they never really look deep as they can, as far as they can. So that really gets them looking far, and then now looking for the next. I'll take this a little bit slower here, Paul, where you guys can see. So you guys can see Keon has the ball there. He plays a rhythm pass in with Giuliano. He bounces it back in, and then now Giuliano pops into the gap right behind these two blue players. And then Elijah is now looking for the next action, which he becomes a third man. So it's always looking for, if you're not receiving the ball, what are you doing? Are you now getting the next, are you becoming the free player to now score? Are you popping into the gap just so we can link up with you? So it's always, like I said, just really I'm hammering this a lot with the boys. And I'll show you guys this one here. I thought that was one of the best goals we scored all night. Bounce pass comes in. Giuliano repositions, finds that gap again. Chris plays through, and then Elijah doesn't stand. And then you guys will see in the next one that the Blues also have a very similar action, but they react to it too slowly. No one moves to find the next pass, which is, you guys will see with Pietro here. This player, watch this player right here.
The video's choppy, but I can see.
It's a little hard to see with this very slow motion. Alan, this is Miracle. How you doing? If I write you an email, will you send me this video
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
email?
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I can share it with Paul to share with you guys, but yeah, I can definitely do that, Miracle, for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Alan. So the theme of perception, we talked about it last month. What we've been trying to do in the academy is make it a daily focus, or a focus of an exercise that is really deliberate. So I'll show you this. I think you guys have seen this before, but one thing I wanted to try to do is to begin to make these exercises right here a little bit more deliberate, so we could count and keep track of how many times they're checking their shoulder and when. So I think that you guys have seen this one, but these are the ones that we've kind of been designing with the academy. So example here, deliberate training. So there are 3 surveillance moments: before, during, and after. So this player up here where my cursor is would be the focused player, and he'd be going for a round of maybe 2 minutes. And the objective is for him to train taking those surveillance, those looks away from the ball before, during, and after. So essentially, player 1 begins with the ball, ball's played in. He plays the ball into this group. And as he does this, he looks away from the ball over here. And I actually have Hiro Suzuki on, who's improved this exercise. He checks back. They have to do 3 passes. He checks away again. And then the ball returns to him again. So as he's doing this, this player here is counting and keeping track of those surveillances. Well, those are little types of things that we're trying to do in the academy. Hiro, are you on right now?
Yeah. Hey, Alan, would you mind going to your first exercise?
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Give me 1 second. I don't think. Let me try to share my screen again. Yep.
So were you saying that these 2 wider players were not taking surveillance? They're just looking at the ball the entire time?
So this player here, Danny was. So Danny would always, this player he would receive the ball and always play either into Lucas or across the grid. He never saw Evan, which was on this side, and would be able, because he was allowed to, after 3 passes, they were allowed to receive it in here and find that deep player to score. But he would always just watch the ball, and I think it had to do a lot with his body orientation. He would always be and that's what we spoke about in the last meeting. Whenever I asked you, is that player is always just watching the ball. He never opened up his body to see Evan, because if he would have seen Evan, he would have been able to receive it out, and then Evan was making really good movements behind that player. He was never directly behind the defender. He was always getting to the cone where he can receive the ball and then play again. But Danny, yeah, that player struggled right there, Danny.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking when you were saying that, I think you put a rule in for the next game that you could put in for this one, where that wide player finds the other target player directly, give him an extra point.
Yeah.
That way he's looking that way more.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, I like that rule. Yeah, that's not a rule that I had thought about, from winger to target player. That's something that we encouraged in the last game. Giving them, I think, an extra incentive. I can tell Danny, but I think if we reward Danny with an extra point, I think he'd do it more often. Thanks, Hiro. Appreciate that.
And then, how deep was that middle channel there for you?
It was maybe 4 yards. It wasn't that much space.
Well, go on, Alan.
Hey, Dylan, how are you?
I'm blessed.
Good. Nice to see you, man.
Same here, buddy.
So Alan, like you're saying, typically this central player is the one that's checking. He has to know the pressure behind him. So your wide players here it was body orientation, closing their body off, and then not checking.
Yeah.
So how are you keeping track of that? How are you improving that?
So in the clip that Gareth showed, we do that one before we did this activity. That was like the warm up. This was the next activity, and that game, this final game was the last one. So with the boys, we keep track. We would play like 1 minute rounds, and we had one player that would show them a blue penny or a yellow penny, and similar to Gareth, the penny meant an action. And we had 3 different actions. Yellow meant bounce pass. 2 of the blue penny meant turn and play. If both pennies were up, the play was to turn, do 2 dribbling moves, and then rotate the ball. So we keep track of Danny. Danny was a little bit lower. The players get about 20 actions. We recorded the top players on our end to get about 20 actions. They still miss. Not every play gets them right, but they get about 20 actions in a minute. So Danny was on maybe about 12 points, 11 points, where a player like Evan, who was at the end, he was getting about 15, 16, 17 points. So that's how we keep track of it. And then we're always trying to make sure, we do 1 minute rounds. The distance, we don't change the distance in between them because we want to make sure that it stays consistent for the players, and we can try to track a little bit better. But right now, Danny's, like I said, he's barely scraping double digits. And that's just because he doesn't check before, he doesn't look fast enough, or because he makes the wrong decision. So if they get the wrong decision, if they see yellow and they turn and play, that's wrong. Then they don't get a point. They only get a point for every successful one that they get. And we have the end player that's keeping track of the points.
Got it.
They get about 20 actions in a minute or so. But the thing that we added in with Garrett is that instead of having, let's say, for example, that player and that player stand in the same position they were in, we have this player moving now. It's about, we opened it up about 5 yards, and this player can be moved from cone to cone, because what we notice is that the player is only looking over his right shoulder. He's never looking over his left shoulder. But if we have the player moving behind him now, he's consistently having to look left, look right, fix his body position so he can see that player. So that's a little bit of an adjustment that we made with that exercise.
Those objective players should never be stationary.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alan. So, guys, I appreciate that. That's a little bit of, creating your own exercises, to develop perception. That's really good stuff.
Paul, I'm sorry, before we move, the restriction of the touches, the middle guy, what is the restriction, and what's the restriction of the touches of the outside people? They never explained that. Can you vary that 1 touch or 2 touch, or unlimited for the middle guy, or what?
Yeah, so whenever the player saw a yellow penny, that meant bounce pass. That meant you have a man on. That bounce pass had to be 1 touch.
Okay.
If they saw blue, that meant turn and play. So they should be doing it in 2 touches. Some players like Danny, for example, would do it in 3 because he doesn't orientate correctly. He needs an extra touch.
Okay.
And if they saw blue, both of them, they should turn in 1 touch and do two quick moves. But the end players, they just want to make sure they keep the ball moving and they don't have the middle guy waiting for too long.
Okay.
The most important thing is the middle guys are working.
Fast tempo. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
All right. Awesome. So, guys, we're gonna move on now. We've got a special guest, Tanner Chassman from the Dynamo Academy, who's our skills coach, and he's gonna go over what I'm sure is gonna be a wonderful presentation on the work that he's been doing during the COVID-19 on the theme of technical excellence. So I'm going to hand it over to Tanner.
Sounds good. Thank you, Paul. Let me just share my screen real quick. Everyone can see that okay?
Yep.
And you're taking the time to collaborate and learn from other coaches. I think it's incredible, and it's awesome that Paul gets to bring everyone together to learn from each other. So as Paul said, I'm the technical skills coach at the Dynamo Academy, and my job is to I work with everyone. I've worked with everyone from the grassroots all the way up to our pre-professional phase. But my main job and my main role is to focus in on the foundation and formation phases and make sure that they're technically proficient enough to play at a high level in the pre-professional phase. That's my job. So today I'm just going to go over what technical excellence is and how it relates to the individual, and pretty much just talk about my experiences and how that connects. So one sec. So first off, just to start, I'd like everyone to please in the chat answer this question. Why do you love the sport of soccer? I'm going to give you guys 1 minute. Go ahead. Is there a chat that shows up for you guys? "30 seconds. Fun and exciting, creative, artistry, fun a sport to watch and play in the world, fun and creative, connects people." Keep them coming. Enjoy the passion of the sport. Sharing my love for the game with others, expression, love it. 10 more seconds. Fun, competition. It's a game you play for life. No words can express it. And time. Love it. Love the answers that I got. All right, next one for you guys. Why do you coach? You got 1 minute again, write in the chat, why do you coach? And if you're not a coach and you're just a member of a club, why are you still involved with the sport? Go. Guidance, give back, help the kids learn about sport and life, help the kids, develop all players, player development, help kids, develop the next generation of players. I'm good at it. Positively impact players, kids. Give to the kids the chance to become what I didn't have as a coach, sharing my love and helping to shape future players and coaches. Love to see players learn the game. 15 more seconds. Love to see players learn the game. Develop the youth. And time. Awesome. I wanted to start off with those questions because I feel like there's many times where we lose that understanding of why we do what we do. And it's important to always just remind ourselves basically why we're on this call today. And a lot of the answers were, it's for the kids. So I'm going to play this video. I know the videos have been choppy over Zoom. I probably won't play the whole thing, but just enjoy. All right, and I'm going to end it there. So that is why I love the game, because of the art of football. And I don't know if you really could see it through that video, because I know it can be pretty choppy, but from my end, it was just pure beauty. And that's why I love the game. It entertains and it brings joy to people, the people that play it, and then the people that watch it as well. So quickly, just so you understand my background, I'm from Chicago. I played for the Chicago Magic Academy. In my high school years, I attended IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. During that time, Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, the future of American soccer, was in residency at IMG. And I got to see them as 15, 16-year-olds before they ever blossomed into the players that they became today. That's me playing against Jackson Ewell, who's on the San Jose Earthquakes. I had a bunch of injuries in my high school years, which led to my career ending by the time I was 18 years old. And I started getting into coaching when I was 19. So I coached with Corver. I did a bunch of other skill camps for my local clubs. And then I also did some individual training as well with my own business. My junior and senior year of college, I went to the College of Charleston in South Carolina. I was an undergraduate assistant coach under Ralph Lundy, who coached for 35 years in Division I soccer. And then most recently, I've been the technical skills coach here at the Dynamo Academy since last July, so over a year, just a little over a year now.
Did Matt Makovich was your coach?
Say that again?
Matt Makovich was your coach?
No,
In
he
Chicago
was
Magic?
no, he was not.
Oh, he was your director.
Yeah,
he was okay.
Not at the time I was there.
Yeah, he was my coach when he was really young. But he have a good program. The Magic is a good program. Chicago Magic.
Yeah, it's no longer an academy now.
Okay.
They had some of the top players. Brad Guzan came out of there.
Okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed my time. But this was most of my youth soccer experience was this kind of a coach. All up in your face, yeller. And especially at the age of between 10 and 11, I had a coach who I found out later when I was older was an alcoholic at the time. And at that time when I was a young kid, he made me want to quit the sport of soccer. And soccer was the only thing I really loved and enjoyed and was good at. And it took one person and his attitude and his own crap that he had going on in his life to make a young kid want to quit something that he really loves. Luckily, I had one coach who was actually a technical skills coach who brought me out of that funk, pushed me to work on my own, work with him, and that's why I'm still involved with the game today is because of him. And then the knee injuries, which was a whole other ordeal, 3 ACL tears, which led to me getting into coaching. And then that leads to my why, which is interesting because it's pretty much what everybody said in their answers. And for me, I just put it in 2 words: players first. No matter what decision that I'm making, I ask myself, is it for the betterment of the individual player at that moment or for the long term? And then I also see it as how can I partner with the individual player to optimize their ability to achieve their goals? So it's about them and their goals, not my goal for them, but their goal for themselves. And I use that word partner because we're in this together and it takes 2 to tango, right? If I want it more than the player, he's never going to reach his goals or the level that he wants to get to, right? And if he wants it so bad and I'm not giving enough to him, then he's not going to optimize his ability to get there. So it takes 2, and we have to be in a partnership with our players. Now I'm going to get into technical excellence and what technical excellence really is. Real quick, please put in the chat all the techniques that you know of in the sport of soccer. Real quick. Go ahead. 1 minute. Every single technique that you can name. You can name multiple. First touch. Receiving. Keep them coming. There's a lot. Volleys, perception, turning. Surveillance. Passing, first touch, dribbling, shooting, goalkeeper saves, dribbling. Good. Keep them coming. Volleying, running with the ball, shooting, passing. Pass, shoot, anticipation, running, agility, faking, 1v1, heading. 5 more seconds. All right, that's good. So there's a lot of techniques, obviously, in soccer. But how do we break them down? So I'm going to start off with breaking down what we call technical excellence, and the difference between technique and skill. Earlier in the lockdown, me and Nelson, who I believe is also on the call or was, we did a presentation on technical excellence and what differentiates technique from skill. So we define it as technical excellence is the ability to execute a process, movement, or action at the highest level. All right. And to achieve technical excellence, it takes the technique, it takes the skill, and then for absolute excellence, it takes the proper decision. Okay, whatever that may be. Technique is the process that's involved in executing a general movement. It's a certain movement. It's more, it's general, it's broad, and the execution can be unique to the individual. So I put Leo Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo here because obviously they're the epitome of technical excellence. They're the godlike figures of it, but they're both unique and different in their own ways based on their size. So the way they strike a ball, the way they dribble is unique to them, while also they have the same general techniques of how you teach how they dribble in a way. It looks unique because of what they look like, but generally it's a similar technique. And then the skill is the ability to do something well and with expertise. And when it comes to skill and coaching it, it's all about the detail. The detail is everything. So the skill is the speed, the precision, the speed at which you move. Are you slowing down? Are you speeding up? Are you accelerating, decelerating? When do you do those things? Precision. Where are you placing the pass? Are you passing it to their front foot, to their back foot, in front of them, through the lines? So many different things, little subtleties, right? And when I make that pass, am I looking away so to almost fake the defender that I'm going one way but going to go the other way? The exaggeration in which you turn or you hesitate and try to beat a player, and then the intensity level at which you go at. So all those little details go into the skill and are what create masters. And that's what we want, especially at the Dynamo Academy, is masters of the ball. So detail is so important. So I'm going to go into detail a little bit more. When it comes to coaching, no matter what method, I think no matter what method you're doing, and whether it's a technical execution, tactical situation, hybrid, you're doing ball mastery, you're doing partner passing, whatever you're doing, I think any of those methods can be done very well. I was telling Paul this the other day. So many times on Twitter, soccer Twitter community, it's just a bunch of people talking about what's the right thing to do. This is right, that's right, blah, 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 blah. I had to get off Twitter because I had to just think for myself for a little bit. And So let's look at one technique that we can really break down into details. So I wanted to go with the one that everyone loves and what makes the crowd go crazy and what we think of when we think of kind of technical excellence is the 1v1 and the art of it. So here's the situation. The situation is the 1v1 take on from the width. The specific technique is called a take on, right? A take on, I described it as it's a type of dribbling technique with the intention to beat an opposing player, okay? So we say dribbling all the time. I believe dribbling is too broad. There's different ways in which you can dribble depending on the situation. And so I've called it, and I've seen other people call it a take on, all right, where you're trying to beat opposing defenders and break those lines. So these are the details that I've broken it down into, and there's 6 of them. So, and we'll go through each of them. And it starts with positioning, your first touch, your approach, how you unbalance, how you then accelerate or decelerate, depending on the situation, and then the final product. So positioning. So if you're in front of the defensive line, right, and you're on the width, most likely you're backpedaling to the width with open body orientation in order to see the field and the players around you. Is the defender on your back? Is the defender close? Those are things to take into account with your positioning. Now let's just say your position on the field is behind the defensive line. Let's just say the wide player made a run in behind, right? The movement behind the line, and they receive on the move. That takes a different technique, right? And then they're met by a retreating defender. So that's the first detail that you can go into in a 1v1 on the width. Second, and this is very dependent on the situation, whether you're in front of the line, whether you made a run behind the line, and where the defender is what kind of first touch are you taking, right? Is it a control first touch? Control I've defined as when you receive it and it's underneath your body, right, within your control radius. Or second, are you able to take an escape touch, which I've defined as taking a touch into space and away from pressure, right? If the defender's jumping in, closing down me as the ball is coming, and I see that he's going to be off balance, I'd rather take that touch behind him so I can beat him even quicker. Then we have the approach, and this is when the player's on the ball now and he's approaching the defender to make his move. So this all depends on the proximity to the defender, how close you are. Are you at a standstill? Are you 3 to 5 yards away so you have a little bit of a run up? Or are you 10 yards away to where you can gain some speed? At what speed do you approach the defender? With which part or which foot are you going to drive at the defender with? And what part? At what angle are you going to drive at him with? Are you going to go straight on, or are you going to drive to the space? Where should your eyes be looking? And that's dependent on the situation, right? We try to say, look up from the ball, take glances up from the ball so that you can see your surroundings. Sometimes you're looking 3 yards ahead of the ball to see the defender's feet, and maybe you can use your peripherals to see opposing defenders and fellow attackers as well. Please go on mute. If you're not on mute, can you please go on mute?
If you're not on mute, if you can please go on mute.
Roy, can you go on mute, please? Paul, are you able to unmute?
Yeah.
Tanner's muted.
Yeah. Tanner, can you unmute yourself?
Unmute. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. Then we're at the unbalanced part. So how are we going to unbalance the defender to then beat him in behind? Are we going to use a hesitation, right? Different feints, a skill move? Are we going to just use the big leading touch to get him behind? Or could we even nutmeg the defender and go through him, right? It's dependent on the situation and what the attacker sees. The fifth part, acceleration or deceleration, right? How do we get past the defender with speed, right? That's when we accelerate, when we increase the rate of our speed. So in order to break away and get away from our defender, we must accelerate, right? And sometimes there's another defender coming our way and we're going to have to decelerate. Or in order to cross or pass or finish, we're going to have to decelerate, make sure we're balanced, and then finish. And then that goes into the last part, the final product. None of these 5 steps really matter at the end of the day if there's no real final product, right? Did we create space for the pass or cross? Did we end up blowing past the defender and continue dribbling and progressing up the field, right? Was there a ball loss? That's another final product. That's obviously what we don't want, but it happens. Or did we get a shot on goal? So these are all the details that you can go into in a 1v1 take on from the width. And if you're in a practice session, maybe you just decide to talk about one of them and really dial into the detail of it. You never know what the player is going to take away and what's going to stick with them for life. That makes them a better player. We can go into even more detail, right, on the decision they make. If they cut inside, what does the picture look like? More times than not, when you cut inside, you're going to have to use more close control type skills because there's more defenders within the interior, right? If you're cutting to the outside and you're beating them along down the line, we're saying that the player's on the width of the field. This allows the player to probably push the ball even further in front and then run onto and use their top speed, right? It allows them for them to accelerate past the defender, and then eventually they're going to have to position their body in front of the defender's running lane in order to gain an advantage, right? Especially if that defender's retreating, you got to use your body to get in front of them. So even more details that you can go into on what kind of solution that attacker decides to do, whether they cut inside or outside. And then that leads into decision making. So we all know this, the picture on the field is constantly changing in soccer. And in order to play at the top level, you have to make the right decision with the right technique at the right moment. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And even the top players don't do it all the time, but they do it more often than not, right? And it's all about the reading of cues that allow them to make the decision. They have to be able to see the cue in order to make the decision. So in your practice sessions, that is key. They have to be able to recognize those cues. They have to be present in your exercise for them to ultimately make a decision on whether they're cutting inside, outside, they're going through. Do they take smaller, big touches? And maybe is it an individual solution where they take the player on by themselves, or is it a collective solution and they recognize the cue that they've got a fellow center midfielder coming in to create a 2v1 and then beat him with a combination to get in behind as well, right? But they have to be able to recognize those cues, and you have to layer in those details as well. And most importantly for me, and me and Nelson talked about this, is rewarding the attempt, not the actual outcome, right? Especially with our young players, right? In our grassroots, in our foundation, in our formation phases, we have to reward them and praise them for trying it, right? For having the idea, and maybe they don't actually execute it properly. That's where we can teach them. But the outcome on whether the pass was completed, whether actually beat the defender, that is secondary, because it's you have to look at it from the long term. Reward the attempt and not just the outcome. And then I believe that really goes into the mentality of a player. So technical excellence and mentality is so key, and they're so intertwined. I think mentality and psychology is intertwined with every part of soccer, but This is how it is with technical excellence. So we had Danny Rios, who just signed with our first team, and he's going to start up in January, probably with RGV. He was an under 17, and we had him speak with our U12s over the COVID-19 period back in, I believe it was April or May. And this is what he said. I asked him a question about this, and this is what he had to say to the kids, because he had the opportunity many times to train with the professionals. And so this is what he said. At the pro level, you don't have time to take more than 2 to 3 touches. The speed of the pass is so fast, it almost has a different sound to it than at the academy level. Confidence is king. Be willing to make mistakes. Tell yourself you're the best player on the field. When you lose the ball a bunch of times in a row, don't hide. Ask for the ball even more. Play yourself into the game. And that's huge. That shows you the mentality of Danny, and why he is where he is right now is because he thinks that way. And it's our job as coaches to help breed this kind of mentality in our players. And that will allow them to thrive and have this attitude to not hide, but give me the ball more and let me try. So I'm not going to go too deep into this. I did a technical analysis of individual players and kind of connected it with a world-class player, a Dynamo player, one of our pre-pros, and then a U13. So they all play either at the wing and they can play at the 9 as well, but mainly on the wing. And I looked at their 1v1 ability of Mbappe, Elise, Josh Hallenberger, who's now at Clemson, and then Marvin, who's now graduated to our U14s. I'm not going to go into all the clips, but this was one clip that was a mirrored situation. It was the same exact, pretty similar situation that Marvin went through, that Josh also went through. So as we know, the video might be choppy. I'll play at different times, but this is why I believe we need to reward the attempt and not just the outcome. So this is Marvin. He's now a U14. Receives the ball out wide, tries to play it around the defender, doesn't get there, and it's a ball loss. This is Josh Hallenberger. He's playing against RGV, and he's successful with it. I'm going to play it one more time. Marvin, U14. He doesn't yet have all the tools. He doesn't have the acceleration to get past the defender, and it doesn't work out for him. But I'm just going to go back one more time. He recognized the cue. He saw space. He's down the line, and he tried to beat him with his speed, even though he doesn't have it yet, right? For me, I don't see anything wrong with that. That was the fine decision, because eventually he'll be a Josh Hallenberger taking on RGV, and he's going to have to make that decision, and it will be successful, right? Because he's going to have the ability. He'll have that acceleration to get past the defender now. And if we continue to reward him trying it, then it's more likely that he's going to try it when he's at the pre-professional and professional levels, if he gets there. So this is something that I've been working on during the quarantine, kind of just to help us better create our technical exercises. And I wanted to really break down the techniques and skills that we have in the sport of soccer. That way we're making sure that we hit all of them. So I started off broad with the techniques, and then I'll go specific in with the types, and then eventually the skills. So passing to start off. Passing is crucial to our game, especially the way we play at the Dynamo Academy. And everywhere you have to be able to pass, obviously. So these are the different types of passes that I have seen. So a standard pass, 5 to 30 yards, making sure there's top spin on it, and it's direct to the target. Use the inside of your foot. We have bent passes, where it changes the initial trajectory to the target. There's inside, where you can use your instep, and then outside bent. We have driven balls that are at high speed, top spin. They can either have top spin or backspin. You normally to the target and 20 plus yards. Through balls, which are weighted passes that lead your target so that they can run onto it. A set ball, you can also call one-touch bounce. It's usually 0 to 10 yards, and it could be direct or lead your target. Trick pass, that's where all those skills and the skill builder stuff that we work on come in handy. These involve a hesitation or disguise to get the ball to the target, and it requires creativity and flair. And then crosses. So we've got bent crosses, driven, standard passes. These ones are on the ground. And then myself and Kenny Bundy, who's our U19's head coach and works with the first team as well. He has helped in really dialing down 3 areas of crosses and 3 zones in the box of where we want to cross. We have passes in the air. There's lobs, which are, they beat multiple opponents. They're long distance. They're more straight on. A chip is more precise. It's short distance and in tight spaces. A diagonal is driven diagonal from your position on the field, and it switches the point of attack. A volley is a pass out of the air. A header, there's direct, where your shoulders are facing your target, or flick on, where your head has to move. We have bent, and then we have the different kinds of crosses. Receiving, so different ways of receiving. So I narrowed it down to 3, and I'd love to hear suggested at the end if there's any more thoughts as to more things, because I'm sure I could be forgetting some. There's a lot, but I narrowed it down to control. So your first touch is underneath your body, as I said earlier, or within your kind of control radius around you. An escape touch is your first touch into space and away from pressure. And then what I called the FFF, which is face forward fast. So your first touch is with the intention to face forward immediately. And that's what we talk about a lot, is how quickly can we get our body to face forward and go to goal? Because that's at the end of the day, we're trying to get goals. So we need to face forward in order to most effectively make that happen. And the best way to do it, and the best and easiest, is the half turn. The half turn is where your body is positioned, open to the field. You can see both sides. That's the best and probably most efficient FFF way of receiving that there is, and one that we focus on a lot. And obviously all those, especially the FFF, require perception. And those are even more details that you can layer into the receiving part. And then within your trainings, right, make sure they're exposed to all kinds of ways that they're receiving the ball, whether it's on the ground, whether it's off the bounce and it's not so perfect, or whether it's out of the air. Dribbling. So I've narrowed it down to 4 different types of dribbling, and then there's details within it. But take-ons we talked about earlier, dribbling with the intent to beat opposition defenders. There's what I call carrying, and I've heard other people call carrying, which is dribbling with the intent to just progress the ball forward into space. When you're carrying the ball, most likely there's not defenders really pressuring you. You have space. And the main thing is your head should be up. You should be seeing the field as you're carrying the ball, right? That's where you're really taking in a lot of information to then make the next best decision. Ball protection is dribbling or maneuvering facing kind of side on or backwards to the opposition. That's pretty self-explanatory. That goes into turns. A lot of the time turns goes into ball protection and different hesitations like that. And then ball control, which is manipulating the ball in tight spaces. That's when you have a lot of defenders around you and you're taking small manipulative touches. That's where a lot of ball mastery exercises can really help with ball control. And lastly, this is finishing. So different types of finishes. We have power, utilizing the speed of the shot to beat the keeper. Finesse, guiding the ball to a specific target of the goal past the keeper's based on the keeper's positioning and the situation at hand. A redirect is usually from a cross, and it's a one-touch finish. Volleys finish from the air, and then headers direct with shoulders face toward the target or flick on. So those are all the offensive on-ball techniques. Obviously, there's many more techniques that we can go over in terms of defensively. I'm still working on narrowing those down because it's not just offensive techniques, there's defensive techniques. These are all on-ball techniques as well. We can go into offensive off-ball techniques, which would be things more like, and maybe they'd be considered more skills, but they're things like surveillance and positioning, maybe communication. Those kind of things can be off-ball skills that you need to learn. Not going to go through all of these, but this is where the skills come in to the technique and how we can teach it. So I've categorized all these: ball mastery, juggling, passing, receiving from the air and the ground, dribbling, the different kinds. So just dribbling straight forward or backwards, hesitations, turns, and then finishing. All right. So by doing this, it's going to allow us to create much better, more focused sessions on what we're actually trying to achieve and what we're trying to teach our players, and how do we make them more technical and skillful on the ball. So if I'm working on ball control that day, I'm going to use most likely a lot of these ball mastery exercises, maybe a little bit of hesitations, right? If I'm working on take-ons, right, I'm going to use a lot of these dribbling hesitations. Okay, there's many, many different things that we can do here. So now I'm going to just go into first, before I keep going, do we have any questions in what I've gone over so far? I know it's been a lot, but any questions so far?
No, so far it's excellent, everything. I mean, you cover everything.
Okay. Yeah, let me know if you have a question, just chime in, feel free. This is something I've been, this was my main focus this past year, was on this Skill Builders program. I have spoken a lot about it with the partners in development, and most of you have probably heard my spiel about it, but just gonna go into it real quick because I think it's an extremely important program that we have, and it's gonna continue to evolve from here, especially based on the experiences I've had over the COVID period. So this was the Skill Builders program. If you're unfamiliar with it, the purpose of the program, when I first came here, one of the big tasks we wanted to figure out was how do we best get our players to own their own development and train more at home. So the purpose of it is we want our players to own their personal development. We're encouraging them to train on their own outside of the structured training, right? It gives us a way to track our players' development at home and kind of see what they're doing and what they're working on. And at the end of the day, it fosters a love for the ball, which is so necessary in becoming a technical, skillful player, especially at these younger ages. Grassroots foundation formation. These are the three different parts of the program. We've got the Skill Builder card, we have videos that go along with the card, and then we reward our players with some recognition as Players of the Month. This is what the card looks like at the beginning of each month. Our players receive that. We did this last year with the 13s and 14s. So on one side of the card is a calendar. They write their name and the month that I gave it to them. So I'll give it to them on the 1st. And then on the back side is the instructions, and then all of the skills that I gave them. So last year I did 5 ball mastery, 5 dribbles, 5 different turns, a different pass, a different shot, a different juggle, added in a physical challenge, and then they could write in their juggle record. So this is to help them keep track of what they're working on during the month. Basically on the calendar is if little Johnny, if he worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday by himself for at least 30 minutes that day, he'd get his parents to initial the day in which he worked for 30 minutes on his own. on the calendar. And what we're aiming for is at least half the month, so 15 days out of the month, and then they'll get some recognition. So, yeah. And what else was I gonna say? And this is evolving. So this format is going to change a little bit to where it's more focused. So last year it was more general skill. This year, my goal is to make these so that they all connect with one another. So that if, let's just say the skills of the month, we're working on inside and outside of your foot, all of these skills would be inside and outside of the foot. That way they can really, truly master it for that month. So that's the goal going into this upcoming season. This was Curtis. He's going to be a U14 with us. He did every single day of the month. This is an example of one of the videos that we make. And this is, it might be choppy, but I'll play a little bit of it. This is Danny Rios, who I talked about earlier. Got him to demonstrate. So those are the kind of videos that we make to go along for the Skill Builder program. So they're connected with the cards so they can see exactly how to execute the move. And then we reward our players with the Player of the Month, and they're recognized on our social media accounts. We didn't get to dig into it too much because it was kind of just starting when COVID hit, but it's going to be brought back when we start back up. And the program will be starting up again in September. We made a Player of the Month video for Curtis here. So he was super excited about this, and yeah, he really enjoyed the recognition that he got just through video form. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but that's what we do for our Players of the Month. It started off with the Academy. It went to our Catalyst campuses as well, and it's been shared also with partners. So if any of you guys haven't heard about it and would like to be in on the Skill Builders program, feel free to contact me and we can help get you started with it. Now this was huge for me recently. So when COVID first hit, we all had the challenge of how do we continue training and how do we best do it for our players. And it required a lot of creativity and thinking on your feet and how can we best do it. A lot of trial and error. What we came up with were these WhatsApp group challenges, and they were kind of inspired by Tom Byer, who's the head of Soccer Starts at Home, and how he would do these 6-week challenges or 15-week challenges with young players and parents, and basically communicate to them through video and messaging through WhatsApp. And he'd give players a challenge for the week, and they would have to submit videos of themselves working on it at home, and their parents would take a video of the kid playing with the ball, doing ball mastery exercises, and Tom would receive the feedback and be able to give feedback back to them through WhatsApp. So we did all of our training for the formation phases through WhatsApp groups. So we started on March 15th and ended on June 31st. And over the course of time, we had 28 different clubs doing these WhatsApp challenges. And what it turned into was it mirrored our academy training. So Monday through Thursday, I would give them a daily challenge, because Monday through Thursday is usually when we'd practice. They would receive a daily challenge. Friday, they'd get off. And then Saturday and Sunday is their weekend. I would give them more of a fun challenge that weekend to kind of either do it with their family or just something a little bit different than just focused entirely on technique. But these are just the kind of messages that I would send out. And I don't know if you've read them while I've been talking, but it gave me the opportunity to talk more about just technique and communicate to them about more mental things that really matter and why it's tied into technical excellence. And here I talk about their purpose and understand what motivates you, because that's what's going to help you get through hard times, because these kids were going through some crazy stuff that I couldn't even imagine going through at their age, not being able to see their friends, go to practice, go outside. I couldn't imagine it. It was tough on me, and I bet it was tough on all you guys. And also in these WhatsApp challenges, the biggest thing too, especially from a technical perspective, was I gave them guidance and a framework for what to do on that day, but I never told, or sometimes I did, but more often than not, I gave the framework, but didn't tell them exactly what to do, exactly what skill to work on. I wanted them to own it and to work on whatever they felt was right, and to pick what worked for them and what they wanted to do. So this one was, what was it? Oh, they had to pick a new skill. So any new skill that they wanted to work on that day, it just had to be new, and they had to work on that. This one was, I wanted them to watch a player that they looked up to, look at their YouTube videos, and then go out and train as if they were that footballer on that day, right? And I noticed on those days that it would increase the intensity level at which they trained. And this is an exercise that I did when I was 10 to 12 years old. I discovered YouTube, and all I would do is watch Cristiano Ronaldo, David Beckham, Leo Messi videos, watch the videos for hours, and then go ride my bike to the park and practice them. So I tried that out with the kids as well. And these are the kind of, I won't play the whole video, but these are the kind of things that we got from them. So this is a video where they got to create their own training session, write it down, reflect on it, and here's a video that goes along with it. So I'm going to end it. I'm going to end on that one. This was a juggling one that they did. I'll go into it real quick. So everything in that video, they came up with on their own. I didn't give to them, including the juggling. They came up with it all on their own. And it taught me a lot of lessons. And I narrowed it down to these two in particular. So the power of autonomy and giving them the right to make their own decisions in their training, not you do whatever you want and I'm just going to sit back and do nothing as your coach. No, give them the framework for what you want to see and allow them to make the decision on how much effort they're going to put into it and what they're going to work on for themselves. I think that's huge. And I learned how creative these kids can be in the creation of their own sessions. It was ridiculous. Some of the stuff I saw in these videos, like I wouldn't even be able to coach or come up with myself. And they provided me a lot of ideas that I can use in my sessions going forward. And it ties way back to what we were talking about. Why we do it is for the players, and it came just from the players. And then the second thing is deliberate training, and Paul touched on it a lot. And it's super important how our players, because it was a daily challenges, they were deliberately training on one focus for that day. And it's so important to have focus in your training and not just going out just to kick it, but literally going out deliberately focused on one idea, one skill, one technique, and trying to better yourself at that technique, skill or idea. If it's professionalism, trying to be a pro on that day, deliberately trying to be your best on that day is extremely important in focus work. I'll go through this very, very quickly because I want to leave some time, and I've got 3 minutes here. But we did an individual development project as a staff where we got to pick a player and work with them. So I chose to work with Micah Harris, who is now a under 13. He's a 2008 left-sided center back and left foot dominant. I won't play this video, but this is Jocko Willink. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he spoke about kind of just leadership and how it was absent basically during this coronavirus pandemic, and how everybody is pretty much looking for a leader. And really he goes into how when he was a Navy SEAL commander that he never told his cadets or whoever's under him what to do. He would allow them to create the plan, then they would go over it together, and then they would execute that plan. And that gives them ownership and the ability to act on what they own rather than the leader saying, hey, this is what we're going to go do it. It's a completely different style. And as a Navy SEAL, which is everything's on the line, for him to do that in his leadership role and have them create their own plan is huge. And I think it really goes into how we should treat our players, as well as what I did with Micah in this time. This is Michel Ribeiro. He is a technical skills coach for Genk. He's worked with Kevin De Bruyne, Origi, Carrasco, and he talks about his role as a coach and how you just have to put your ego aside and do what's best for the players. So in this project, I wanted to get to know the person underneath the player first, and then really work with Micah on what he thought that he needed to be strong in and what he needed to improve. So I came up with a bunch of questions that went into different things like his purpose, his goals, and his dreams. And it's so interesting and fascinating the kind of responses you get from a 12-year-old and how mature they can be. And he's a dreamer. He wants to make the youth national team, and when I'm a teenager, and play in the World Cup one day. Well, it's my job to help guide him each year to get to that goal, at least from a technical perspective. Asked him who his influences are in his life. That's important. I wanted to know his perspective of himself, just as a person, what he likes to do, and then as a player, what does he see himself as? And that's important because in order for me to help make him a better player, we have to see his strengths and weaknesses the same. So in one of his, he said that his strengths was his speed, and he's best at taking players on. And then it's important because he sees that in himself, but I don't necessarily see that in him. He's not slow, but his speed isn't necessarily his greatest strength, and he's a center back. It's not necessarily him taking players on in beating them 1v1 with take-ons, but more entering into space is where his strength lies. So I started off doing juggling tests just to see what his right foot was like, his left foot was like, how they compared. I wanted to see what the way he struck the ball and what the difference was. I wanted to see the way that he handles the ball going to his left and with his right and how they differ. Obviously, he's better with his more dominant, his left, than his right. And it was interesting because then I started giving him sessions. And in our first meeting together, I'd said, in order for our relationship to work, he has to let me know when I'm giving him too much or if he wants even more. And he's got to always be honest with me. So, because he's doing the skill builder, WhatsApp challenges, and this at the same time. And one time I gave him something, he said, "Sorry, coach, it's a lot with the group challenges and the individual challenges." So what I decided to do was no more extra technical work, just focus on the challenges. And we just did film analysis on Fridays. And that just goes into understanding what the player needs at that moment. Let's see, I'm going over my time here, so I'll finish up. I did a SWOT analysis, so went over his strengths, his weaknesses, opportunities, and his threats. Strengths are tied in with opportunities. There are opportunities to grow on the strengths. And then weaknesses and threats are tied together. Weaknesses are what they're not necessarily strong at, but they should be aware of. Like I'm 5'7". I'm not going to spend too much time on winning headers in the interior because it's just not going to happen that much. So I'd better off spend my time doing something else. Whereas threats are, I don't position myself well enough, and that's what's going to keep me off the field, or I don't take surveillance enough, and that's what's going to keep me off the field as I get older, is because I'm not aware. And those are the things that you have to nip at the butt right away. So we did that together. He wrote down everything. I'll skip through all that stuff and what his were in particular. It was interesting because I never told him what exercises to do after we did the SWOT analysis together. But all of his videos and stuff that he started submitting in the challenges were all things that we spoke about in his SWOT analysis. And he created all these sessions on his own. I won't go through them just because I'm going over. In our film analysis, we went over elite players and watched video on them. And this is important to understand because he's graduating from U12 going into U13, so 9v9 to 11v11. This is his experience on the ball all of last year. Those are the only passes he's really had to make and be challenged with. Now he's graduating to this, where he's going to have to make a lot more decisions, right? Probably these black lines here he won't have to do until he's U15, maybe a little U14, but this is what he's going to have to deal with in this upcoming year. So it's important to understand his perspective. And then this is Ribeiro talking about individual development in the formation phase. And he basically says just in training, in structured training, you don't have to take the individual player, let's just say your best player, out to work on extra stuff, because your best player at U13, 14, 15 may not necessarily be your best player in the future. So try to focus on developing the individual within the team and within the structured practice. So in conclusion, if I went over a lot, but these are the 4 takeaways that I hope you remember is, first off, remember why you do it. Technical excellence is and coaching it is really all about the detail that you go into. The power of autonomy and deliberate training is so important to instill into our players, and to partner with each player. And you may have 10 to 24 players on your team, depending on who you're coaching, but try to be there for them and be a partner in their development, and try to help them to achieve their own personal goals as best as you can. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.